Welcome to Podiatry Marketing. I'm your host, Jim McDannald. We're the show that helps you grow your practice, helps you learn about the latest and greatest in podiatry marketing. Joined by always my co-host, Tyson Franklin. Tyson, how's it going today?
Good morning, Big Jim. It's great. I always say, great to be alive because your alternative is pretty grim. So that's why when people complain about life, I go, hey, you're still breathing. There's a lot of people who aren't, who would love to be. So get over it and just get on with it.
That's a positive way to look at it. I think we're all lucky to be here. I'm lucky to be talking to you from across the world. So I look forward to each Tuesday when we record.
Hey, it's interesting. I was at a conference once and there was a guy there who had met this old bloke. It was like his late 80s, had this like best attitude. And he said to him, yeah, why are you so positive? Yeah, what makes you so positive? And he said, when you get to about 70, he said, any day of the week could be your last day. He said, so every morning when I wake up, as soon as my eyes open up, he says, I say to myself, oh, got another one. And
It's
he
a good way to
lives
look at it.
yeah, he lives that day like it could be his last. Who does he want to talk to? Who does he want to reach out to? Is there something he wants to read or somewhere, a trip he wants to do? And every day he just faces it that way that, oh yeah, got another one. And I'm thinking, it's such a good attitude. And it's not that he's thinking that I'm not going to wake up in the morning, but when he does wake up, he just realizes he's got the whole day ahead of him. Make the most out of it.
Yeah, every day is a gift, right? So you just gotta make the most of it, like you said there. I think that's a good way to go through life. But back to like podiatry and the marketing.
Right.
After that
That's
uplifting
right.
message,
Yes.
what are we going to be talking about today?
Today, we are talking about developing micro pillars with the 6 pillars of marketing. And I think before we get to that, I'll just go and do a quick review on the 6 pillars of marketing. Not that I'm sure everyone has been listening to the show for a while, and if they've read the world's greatest podiatry book, it's no secret there's money in podiatry. I've actually sold a fair few on Amazon lately.
Nice.
Considering it's been out for 8 years, I'm surprised it still sells pretty well. But in that book, I talk about the 6 pillars of marketing, and we've spoken about them previously on this podcast. We did them as separate episodes. On episode 15, we did professional referrers. That's pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is non-professional referrers. That was episode 17. Pillar number 3, which is internal marketing. That was episode 21. And it was episode 19. And it just went through from there. So if you go 15, 17, 19, 21, 23, and 25, you'll go professional, non-professional, internal, external, verbal marketing, and online marketing. So it's a bit of a review of what the 6 pillars are. A micro pillar is a smaller pillar within the pillar, pretty much.
I'm looking forward to get into those today.
So people know, they know what it is. They go, oh, I can switch off. I don't need to listen to anything else. But no, hang around. You might learn something. So give an example. So professional referrers, that's the major. And also just to touch on something too, when people say, why do you need to have so many pillars? If you think back to the Parthenon in Greece, I think it was, I don't have the notes in front of me. It was built in 438 BC. Now, it's 2,500 years old. You can go and look at this thing and it's still a recognizable structure. And it's got this massive roof on it. But you have a look at a lot of those structures that were built in those days, and they all had these really massive pillars. And the buildings that had the most pillars are the buildings that are still standing today, because if one pillar happened to fall down, there were all these other pillars there supporting it. So that's the basis of why you need to have multiple marketing pillars supporting your business. And picture your business is like the roof of the Parthenon, like an old structure, and all your marketing pillars and your referral sources are the things that are actually supporting your business. And if one of them falls over, doesn't matter. You've got multiple other pillars there. So what I'm looking at is, if you look inside each pillar, the idea is to have a whole pile of little micro pillars that make up the overall pillar. So an example would be professional referrers might be the pillar. And I know some businesses really rely on a lot of referrals to keep their business going, whereas other people, that pillar isn't as important. But if you break down that major pillar, you've got your local GPs and doctors, your chiropractors, your physical therapists, anybody else that's in the health industry that is treating your patients for maybe some of the problems that you treat. That is a micro pillar within the pillar itself.
That's a great way to look at it. I think, like you said, if one of these little micro pillars goes away, that's not a big deal. You have probably more micro pillars in the community to go after and look after. But I think it's really important to break it down into those micro pillars, because maybe you haven't had a massage therapist or found someone else in sports medicine or a physio or a physical therapist. Now, these are all definitely different avenues and different opportunities for people to build those pillars in the practice.
Yeah, the way I like people to look at it, even if you look at rope or wire, that like a wire cable, normally it's made up. It's not just one piece. It's made up, say a wire cable or rope, of all these other fibers that are wound together to actually create it. So that's why you need to be watching a movie and it's getting exciting and there's tension on the big wire rope and you see each one of the smaller wire bits wound going bing, bing, and popping out. And I was going, oh, are they going to make it or are they not going to make it because it's about to break? If it was just one piece and it broke, they're dead. But having all these little micro pieces that make up the whole, if a couple of little ones break off, you don't really want that happening, but it's better than the whole thing just breaking itself. But even when you look at like a whole pillar, when I first started my podiatry clinic, referrals was such an important marketing pillar. When I sold my clinic, it was probably the least important marketing pillar that we had. It just didn't generate as many referrals as it used to. All the other pillars overpowered it a little bit.
So, like when we're going into making goals with these micro pillars, what kind of things would you suggest?
Hang on, I just need to have a cough.
No worries.
My throat's been crap again. Edit that part out. But I just ruined a really good video. You'd have to go and edit that out now.
I'll just leave it in.
So what was the question again? I was too busy trying not to cough to not be able to answer it.
Yeah. So when you identify these micro pillars, what kind of goals or what kind of objectives should you make regarding these micro pillars?
The whole idea with the micro pillar is to set a goal to actually have as many as possible. So you might, if we stick on, say, professional referrers, for example, you might have 4 or 5 doctors that refer a lot of people to, or 3 or 4 physios. Just keep building those relationships and keep adding more people because you never know when one of those micro pillars within the pillar is going to break and no longer be there. An example I give in my book, and I've mentioned it, I don't think I've mentioned it on this podcast before, but it's if you look at non-professional referrers, shoe stores, health food stops, law offices, accounting, any other business that could refer somebody to you. I had a really good working relationship with the Athlete's Foot at the time on the Gold Coast. And they used to refer all these people to me, tons of patients. And I used to go in there on a Thursday night and I'd see them and everything was good. And all of a sudden, the referrals started to dry up until the point I wasn't getting any referrals. And I was going from like maybe 5 to 8 a week to nothing. And I go, that's a huge change, like in a matter of 6 or 8 weeks. So I went down there and I won't say the guys' names. And I said, hey, I'll call him Douglas. Douglas, is there something wrong? You're not referring anyone to me anymore. They went, there's a new podiatrist that's opened up in town. And I went, yeah, but I've been working with her for like 2 years. I went, yeah, but have you seen how good she looks? And they went, she's really nice. So I had an option right there and then. I could either go and get breast enhancement or I could just move on and find somebody else. So that's what I decided to do. So the point of that story is sometimes the relationships can break down with a micro pillar or a referral source. It's out of your control. They were totally looking at, they want to have a relationship with the young female podiatrist that was attractive, not the wildly youthful looking younger podiatrist as I was at the time, but I was male. And I did jokingly say to him, when I see your wife next, I'll just bring that up. So it's important. That's why you want to create as many as you can, because it's out of your control when they choose to no longer use you. You could have a doctor that could refer a lot of people to you, but then their brother graduates and is a podiatrist. They're not going to refer to you anymore. It's out of your control.
I think you bring up a good point. It's some of these things are not in our control. So we have to find alternative ways to track down some of these mini pillars when it comes to referrals. Maybe it's different people in different specialties or different people, non-referral, non-professional refers. Just keeping your mind open as far as where those different categories of referrals could come from and just building those up and trying to find as many as you can. Because like you said, when you have enough of them, one person walking away or not sending you patients, while not ideal, isn't going to be breaking the business or a huge thing to overcome.
Yeah, and that's when some podiatrists, they sit back on their reputation or previous successes or previous relationships, and they forget they've got to keep nurturing those relationships. It's like that wire cable. If you just have a wire cable there and you don't respect it and look after it, it will rust. it can start to break. Yeah, some of those little fibers will break, which is why on cable carts, they tend to check things. They don't just put it up there and go, we assume that wire 10 years later is going to be okay. They're always checking it because if they see a couple of breaks in there, they know, we need to take some action here and fix this up before the whole cable breaks. And that's what you want to do with your pillars is you want to keep maintaining a little micro pillars of the relationships. And even when it's internal marketing, what are all the ways that you can actually talk to your patients? When it's external marketing, what are all the ways that you can actually connect with people externally with your marketing, your advertising? Verbal marketing, what are all the different methods that you can actually communicate through voice that your business exists? And then online marketing, my God, it's just endless on the things that you can actually do there. But if you neglect it, I don't know. I think if you neglect your pillars and the micro pillars, you're just asking for trouble long term.
I think also you isolate yourself, right? I think
Yeah.
if you get successful enough and you just feel like it's always going to be this easy or it's always going to come to me in this way, you're setting yourself up for a big fall in the future because, like you said, you have to have those kind of open lines of communication, not only for you to communicate with those people, whether it would be referral letters or advertising or marketing to them, then also be open to the other form of communication coming back from them. How can you get feedback from them? How can you get their ideas about, patients or what's working for them in their business or in their clinic, and just having a two-way form of communication, which continues to build and grow that bond over time. Because if you're, like you said, if you're just going to sit in your clinic, things are good, but it's not always going to flow like that. So you have to
Yeah.
be constantly hustling and building those relationships in a way that is productive, but also is a win on both sides of the table.
Yeah. And that's why when I've done my marketing workshops or one-on-one coaching, I really push home this idea of what I call marketing pillar rotation. And it's really about whether you want to do it, I don't think weekly, you could do it fortnightly, but I usually say monthly. Look at each pillar. Now, you always should be doing something in every pillar without any problems at all. And the online pillar, I actually believe now is probably one of the most important pillars compared to all the rest. When I wrote, the world's greatest podiatry business book, It's No Secret There's Money in Podiatry. When I wrote that, I actually said that all pillars were equal. When I wrote my next book in 2017, I said that they weren't, or that, they basically weren't all equal. That I think the online pillar is something that you must be constantly working on in so many different areas, but the other 5 pillars are quite equal. I try and encourage people to do what I call marketing pillar rotation, where they put hyper focus on one pillar each month with their team. And they say to the team, this month, our hyper focus is going to be on verbal marketing. So they all sit down as a group, and when they're having their weekly meetings and talking about things, everyone's plan is to try and come up with some more ideas where we can go and do some talk somewhere, or can we get on a podcast, or is there some audio that we should be recording, or even video? Because I class video as being part of that whole verbal marketing. Anything where you're talking is verbal marketing. So really put some hyper focus that month into new ideas that you can add some more micro pillars to the overall pillar. And then the next month, you take your focus off of that. It's still going, but you put your focus onto the next pillar. And the next pillar might be professional. And the next month it might be non-professional. So if you keep rotating it, every 5 to 6 months, you should be putting a lot more focus and adding new ideas on top of the existing ideas that are already there. And that's like the maintenance on the rope. It's the maintenance on the wire cable. It's having a look at it on a regular basis. And by constantly fixing things up or adding new stuff to it, you make the cable stronger and you make the pillar stronger.
I think you take some lessons learned from that as well. You understand by rotating like that, you're learning lessons in each of those different pillars, but then you're also keeping it relatively fresh in the minds of patients or prospective patients. So you're not just you want to find things that are working, but
Mm.
a little bit of difference, a little bit of changes now and then will help spark interest, will keep their attention. By getting better all of these different pillars, you're keeping their attention, you're growing kind of the audience of people you're getting in front of, but also you're learning that whole time about what works for you and your practice and the kind of practice you want to build.
Yeah, I think with verbal marketing, for example, you might be going, okay, let's put some focus on getting more talks in the community. So you start sitting there, and if it's just you by yourself thinking, what talk's going to do? You might go Rotary, Apex, Lions. These are common ones here in Australia. But we have another big one called the Independent Retirees Association. And they're a group of retirees who cannot get any funding from the government because they make too much money. Great patients to have, the ones that have too much money. And so that's another talk. I used to do that every year without fail. And I guarantee half a dozen patients would come from that talk every single time. But when you sit there as a group and you go, hey, this is what we've done in the past. So let's make sure we've got them locked in. What else can we do? So then one of the girls will go, oh, and this is where, and the other part that, and this is something that's also not in my first book and not in my second book either, is there's a crossover between the pillars. So you might be thinking verbal marketing, but verbal marketing also means talking in front of doctors, organizing doctors' visits. So even though your focus might be, oh, what can we do for verbal marketing this week? Someone says, why don't we try and organize more talks with the doctors? That's two pillars at once that you actually tell it. So there is a big crossover between what you're doing on one pillar will always have an effect on another pillar, because you might be doing some form of external marketing because that's your focus that month. But what you do in that external marketing may work really well online as well. So you're doing two at the same time. But the focus is on one pillar. How you use it, you can do it any way that you actually want.
Yeah, it's good to mix and match those around. It sounds like killing two birds with one stone with a focus in one specific area can definitely be, like I said, can be helpful, but also, like you said, you're taking lessons learned from this and you're developing a base of things that work for you. And then you can iterate on those things or imagine, well, we know these 4 things are really good for us. So what are 2 areas this month or this cycle where we can experiment a little bit? Let's go talk to this other group we hadn't thought of before or something. So I really like the way you framed it there.
Yeah. And what's funny is, so marketing pillars are one thing, micro pillars are another thing. And it's also, and we've mentioned before, you're developing a marketing plan for the year. So when you look at your plan for the year, you might put these marketing pillars, might be part of your overall marketing strategy for the year, what you're going to work on. But I know back in the early days when I probably lacked business experience, it'd be, oh, Foot Health Week is coming up. I don't know, do they have Foot Health Week in America?
They always have these
Yeah,
different
there's always
different
some
kind of
week.
like themed week, right? That's a pretty
Yeah.
common thing for the
Let's see if I can make
American
you smile.
Podiatric.
I wonder if they have Testicle Week.
That's a good question. They have Movember, right? Like
They have
Movember is like the
Movember. Yeah.
testicle.
Yeah, it is. That's Testicle Week, also known as Movember. It's one of those things, though, that, see, in Australia, we have Foot Health Week. A lot of inexperienced business owners will think about Foot Health Week the week before Foot Health Week. And they're running around and go, oh, it's Foot Health Month next month or in a week's time. What are we going to do? And they're all sitting there trying to think of what they're going to do for that particular event. Instead, they go through Foot Health Week, and when it finishes, write a plan of, if we did this next year, this is what we'd do. So when it comes around to it next year, you're thinking of your pillars. How can you use the pillars in Foot Health Month? But you already got the strategy there that you used from last year, and then use that and build on it and to add to it, instead of trying to think on the fly all the time. That's why when you're doing all this sort of stuff, it's documenting it. If you list what you're doing in a particular pillar and you keep a record of that, when you go to look at it the next time, you already know what you've done. You should know what's worked and what hasn't worked. This will sound funny. Do more of what works and less of what doesn't work.
What?
I know. Profound.
Say that one
isn't
more
it?
time.
Yeah. Do more of what works and less of what doesn't work.
That's quite a novel idea. I think some of the listeners will get some feedback about that, but I think it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I think that's a great point. I really, besides doing what works, I think there is this. It's really easy to try things, just do a bunch of things. But I think what you're really touching on there that I really resonate with is that not only do you need to try those things, you need to have kind of a written record of how it went. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think some of the best learnings happen while we don't want to fail necessarily, but like you learn a lot of things either through success or failure when you take the time to have a debrief or a post-mortem about what worked and what didn't work. Otherwise, it's going to feel like magic or it's not going to feel like it's repeatable. But by gathering data, by writing it down, by reviewing it when it's done, then it can be repeatable. But until you do that, it's going to seem like a one-off every single time.
Yeah. And when I first started in business, that was always the case. We would do something, we would get ready for an event, we'd go and do it, we'd come back from that event, and everything would get put back to where it was. And the next time an event came up, we're going, oh, what do we need? And then eventually you realize, what would be good? If we actually had a list of what we actually take to an event and we kept a copy of that, the next time we go to an event, we print out that list and there's our checklist to actually go through. So and this all just comes with experience. It's just the experience of, to me, if you're doing the same task over and over again, then you need to put a system in place to make sure it happens. And your marketing falls in that. The last concept I just want to talk about before we wrap up is a thing called the Red Queen hypothesis. I don't know if you know what that is, Jim.
I think we've talked about it a few times, but I'm not always the best listener. I'm not going to lie.
So the Red Queen hypothesis, and I might butcher this a little bit anyway, but it's a theory in nature. It's a hypothesis in nature that in nature, everything is over proliferated. So trees will create hundreds of thousands of seeds and drop them down because it knows not every seed is going to turn into a mature plant that will reproduce. Turtles, when a turtle lays eggs, very few make it to adulthood. And I think that it is out of every 1,000 turtles that are eggs that are laid, only one turtle makes it to adulthood, which is why hundreds of thousands of eggs are laid year after year. So because this happens in nature, because in nature, everyone's competing for the same space. So they've got to over proliferate because they know not everything's going to make it. Your marketing is exactly the same thing. You've got to over proliferate your ideas, which is why you need to hyper focus on things each month. Come up with all these ideas. Doesn't matter how stupid they are, but the idea is to kill them as fast as you can, is to put them out there, test it, try it, doesn't work, get rid of it. This works. Do more of what works, less of what doesn't. But just keep pumping the ideas out there. And eventually you will keep finding the ones that actually work and mature and become the adult turtle of your marketing.
I think you bring up a really good point, though. I think it is getting these ideas and then doing some repetition of them. I think when you're the clinic that's doing it, or like with me, if I do my own marketing or if I do something, you're going to see it every single time. So you almost feel like I'm repeating myself. Oh, I don't want to keep saying the same message, but people are busy in the world. So whether it be a LinkedIn post or a blog post, something on a similar topic with a similar message is actually helpful for people because you're staying true to what you offer and putting that message out there in a way that's approachable. And maybe someone doesn't see it on LinkedIn, but they saw it on your blog, or they heard it on your podcast, but not on that Google search ad or something. So we get much more tired of hearing our own selves say things than other people do because there's so much stuff that's going on in the world. So I think when, like you said, finding these great ideas, repeating them, and don't be shy about it because, like you said, every time you say something, but it's a noisy world out there and a lot of it gets lost in the noise sometimes.
Yeah, I remember a sales rep coming up to me once and said, "Tyson, when are you going to change this radio ad that I had at the time?" I said, "Oh, it's simple. I'll change it when it stops working." And they went, "But you've had the same one for 2 years. It's boring." And I went, "But it works." I don't know if you ever heard my God ad that I said? It took God 7 days to create the universe. You haven't heard that?
Yeah,
Probably. I think you may have. Yeah. But that was the thing. That was one of those ones that we tried and tested a pile of things. It worked. Do more of what works and less of what doesn't work. What she wanted me to do was go, "Oh, I'm bored hearing it. Oh, it's working for your business. So I want you to come and develop another one that doesn't work." Or it may have worked better, but the idea is it was working. So why change it? I had a print ad that we used to run that it made me a lot of money over a number of decades. And the reason we kept using it is because it kept working. And I talk about this concept also about finding black caviar. I might talk about that the next time I do my session. We're going to talk about finding black caviar. That was the name of a racehorse, by the way. Otherwise, I'll talk for another half hour. Yeah, I'll talk for another. So it's definitely going to be, my next topic is going to be finding black caviar, which was at the time the world's greatest racehorse.
All right, that sounds like a plan.
Ooh. Okay, Jim, I think we've covered this topic and I look forward to talking again next week.
Sounds like a good one, Tyson. Thanks a lot. And for all the listeners, if you're listening this far, please head over to iTunes, leave us a review, a rating, be appreciated. Tell this to a podiatry colleague of yours that you think could maybe use some of this helpful information that Tyson and I are laying down. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Okay. See you, Jim.
Bye, Tyson.